We've all heard stories about girlfriends and wives going crazy, but this one woman definitely takes the crown. Besides being the craziest wife to ever live, Katherine Knight was also the first Australian woman to be sentenced to life in prison. She ended up getting a life sentence for murdering her husband John Price. This on its own isn't that unique, but the details surrounding her case are out of this world, and the whole situation is extremely bizarre. Katherine and John's relationship started in the early 90s. At first, things were going great, but then they started arguing and fighting all the time, and the relationship started to suffer, until things got critical. In February 2000, Katherine started to assault John on a regular basis, sometimes going as far as stabbing him in the chest. John couldn't take this anymore, obviously. So one day, he decided to kick her out of the house and take out a restraining order against her. On this day, he told his co-workers about his situation and said that if he didn't show up for work the next day, it was because his wife had killed him. They tried to convince him not to go home, but he insisted upon doing so because he believed that Katherine could kill his children if he didn't. When he came home, he found out that Katherine had sent the children to sleep over at a friend's house, so he decided to spend the evening with his neighbor. He returned home around 11 p.m. and went to sleep. While he was asleep, Katherine showed up and woke him up after lingering around for a little while. Instead of kicking her out, John decided to have sex with her and fell calmly asleep afterwards. That probably wasn't the best decision, because after some time, Katherine woke him up again, but this time, she did it by stabbing him in the chest. And you thought your alarm clock was bad. John tried to flee from her. He even made it out of the house, but she caught up to him and dragged him back inside. The next day, one of his co-workers and one of his neighbors tried to knock on his window since he didn't show up for work. After noticing blood on the front door, they decided to call the police. John was found dead with 37 stab wounds, and Katherine was lying next to him in a drug-induced coma. But this isn't even the craziest part. When the police found John, he wasn't in one piece. Before Katherine took the pills, she skinned and decapitated him, hung his skin on meat hooks, boiled his head in a pot, and cooked several dishes out of his body parts. Each meal was intended for each one of his children. Katherine is obviously a lunatic, but her excuse was that she had a very rough childhood. She lived with both of her parents and two sons from her mother's previous relationship. Her father was an alcoholic. He abused and raped her mother, Barbara, up to 10 times a day. Barbara would then talk to Katherine about her hatred towards men and tell her all about her gruesome sex life, in detail. Growing up, Katherine was an outcast and had nobody close to her besides her twin sister and uncle, who ended up committing suicide. This devastated her, and she became a bipolar school bully, but she didn't last in school for that long. She left the school at the age of 15, even though she never learned to read or write. After leaving school, she landed a job in a local slaughterhouse, where she enjoyed cutting up the organs of animals. She referred to this as her dream job. Afterward, she went through various abusive relationships before turning into the famous murderer that we know nowadays as the craziest wife ever. So next time you're mad at your girlfriend about something, remember, it could be a lot worse.